Welcome to Stress-Free IEP. You do not need to do it all alone. With your host, Frances Shefter, Principal of Shefter Law. You can get more details and catch prior episodes at www.shefterlaw.com. The Stress-Free IEP video podcast is also posted on YouTube and LinkedIn, and you can listen to episodes through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. Now, here's the host of Stress-Free IEP, Frances Shefter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our show, Stress-Free IEP. Today, I have a special guest, Shannon Olsen, who's an IEP. She provides IEP support, so she's also an advocate, but she's out in California. And I'm starting to branch out the show to other areas because it's so interesting to hear, even though it's federal law, how things are a little bit different in each state. So Shannon, please introduce yourself to the listeners.
Hi, everybody. My name is Shannon Olsen. I have been a special education teacher for 22 years, and I have been in the field of advocacy for about 5 years now. And I work with students primarily with developmental disabilities.
Great. And I know when we talked, when we first met, the biggest topic that we talked about were the individual transition plans. Yes. And I know that's a huge topic here in Maryland as well, because it's often very neglected. So tell everybody, what is an individual transition plan?
So the individual transition plan, I believe, came into effect in 2004. And it is looking towards the future for the student and making sure we have a plan in place that is student-driven by the student almost. So it is not parent-driven, it is not teacher-driven, it is actually driven by the student and to help them plan their path after that they leave the education system, either that they leave because they got a high school diploma or that they have finished the adult transition program up through age 22.
So student-driven, that's always interesting because the parents still have, I know in Maryland at least, as long as they're still in high school, the parents still have educational decision-making rights. And I know there are several parents that want to drive the IEP and the afterlife experience after high school. How do you get it focused on that it's, get the team to look at it's the child's decision?
So when we're looking at the individual transition plan, where we're looking at kind of three components, and it's focusing on where they want to go for employment, what they want to do for further education, and if necessary, if it applies to the student, independent life skills. So it's a kind of a process. The special education team, their case manager, or whatever you call it in any state, I know there's different terms, but for the lead special education teacher who oversees that child, they really go through an interview process with the student. They do formal assessments as well as informal assessments and surveys to get a sense of what the student could be good at that they don't realize that they're good at. If you're interviewing them, you want to know their passions. You want to know what they want to do and help them make a plan for them to move forward. And it may not be mom and dad's plan. That's okay. But we want to make sure that the student is involved, especially when they're in the secondary program, when they're in the high school setting, that they have ownership of their education. And that's very important.
Right. Yeah, I've done, I know when students go to college, our students with the IEP, they move to college, it's always a huge transition because parents will walk into the disability office and be like, here's my kid's IEP, you need to follow it. And that's not how it works.
No, it doesn't.
The school doesn't talk to the parents. It doesn't matter who's writing the check. The student's the person they talk to unless they give permission. And second of all, IEPs die with high school diplomas. They're just for public schools before high school.
Correct. So it's important if a student is moving on to the community college or a four-year college that their accommodations are well drafted and that it supports the students in their academic needs, and it's very specific because those accommodations can follow into the university setting or the community college setting. They may look different. You may not get everything, but they're going to do their best to follow those accommodations because that is, an Americans with Disability Act's right.
Right, exactly. It just falls on a different law, but the accommodations are still there.
Yeah,
So
we're not going to have any goals.
right, exactly.
No one's going to hold your hand to class.
Goal is to pass the class, do your
Right.
work. The same. Right. But what accommodations do you need? Which is like the extra time or the breaks, or sometimes it's preferred scheduling, I know is one I've seen a lot, because if you're on medication that messes with your sleep patterns or things like that.
Yeah, for students with visual impairments, you may need large print, you may need a reader, you may need, Braille books. Those are all accommodations that are followed through at the university level.
And I know the other difference is that the child or the young adult at this point go and ask for the services. There's no legal obligation for the school to find the children.
Yes.
Which I know is another thing.
Learn to advocate for themselves, which is one of those skills we have to teach the student how to do.
Right. Which is great of why the ITPs are student driven, because you're starting them on the process of, these are your goals. These are your long-term goals. These are the short-term objectives to get there. And what do we need to get to the end goal?
Right.
And so I know, so the ITP, explain to everybody, because some people might not know what the ITP is. What is the individual transition plan? What are the components of it? What should it include?
Depending on your state, you can start as early as 14, I've heard. I know in the great state of Texas, they start at 14. In California, we don't start till 16. But it is a separate component within the IEP that we're going to go over certain things. We're going to want to know the students' preferences, their interests, their goals. And then we're actually going to write goals based on the student need or projection of what they want. So in California, we have I statements. So at the end of high school, I will I will go to community college. I will go to a 4-year college. I will go to culinary school. I will go learn to be a nail tech, whatever their statement is. And that's why it's important. It's not the parents.
Right.
Not the parents. It's what the student wants. It's student driven by their passions and not what we think they need. Once we get what they want to do, then we can look at what type of supplementary services they may need. They may need, if their plan is to go to community college, do we need to help them connect with community college? Do they need to have to go on a tour? Do they need help with their application? Do they need help with filling out their FAFSA? All those kind of components are things that we can help them with to get them on the right track. And then beyond that, then we write an actual IEP goal for each section that helps them reach that goal that they want.
I love you say that, the IEP goal, because the IEP goal should be just like a regular IEP goal with the SMART, specific, measurable, all of those.
So parents who are listening, it is a separate goal. It is not tied to another academic goal. There's a separate goal for this.
Exactly. And it needs to be specific, because there's so many times I've seen, in Maryland and DC as well, I see that the goal is we'll research 4-year colleges.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what every 11th grader is doing that wants to go to a 4-year college. And I know that's something that comes up often, is that, it needs to be specific. And the schools tend to look at me like I'm crazy and it's not, I don't think it's that the schools don't want to do it, but I know from when I was a teacher, you're not taught how to do all this stuff on the IEPs.
You are correct. We are not taught as educators how to write the best individual education plan. We're given bits and pieces, the main components, but writing these IEPs is a gift, and it takes practice, and it really takes knowing your student. And writing transition goals are kind of hard, I think, for a higher level academic student, especially. My demographic is intellectual disability. So my goals are a little bit, they're easier for me to craft than it would be a more typical student who is, getting a little, few services, little services, I shouldn't say that. But yeah, we don't get enough training at all in any state.
No, and that's true. Like I remember in Maryland, and when I taught, I was down in Florida, and luckily I taught elementary school originally, so I didn't have to worry about transition goals because the kids were all well under 14. But when I taught high school and middle school, and I was the special ed coordinator, I was definitely, I know I didn't write them, right? Like if I go back and look at, IEPs that I wrote back then, I'd be like, ooh, as a lawyer now, like I'm embarrassed I signed that. But then I didn't know any better, and that's part of the reason I do this show. And I wanted to have you on the show is to educate parents and teachers, because I have a lot of teachers that follow me as well, of what they can do to help their students. And I know you said that you focus on children with intellectual disabilities. What does that look like? What would their goals look like?
So our goals, we do a lot of training with our students. So specifically, like if I'm going to give an assessment, a work job inventory that has pictures, I have to first pre-teach what all these things mean, right? And then I have to help them fill it out without giving my impressions of what I think they like the best. And sometimes they just look at me like, I don't know. And I'm like, that's okay to not know. But for me in my classroom, it's a 4-year process to get them to start defining what they would like to do in life. So for our continued education, our ICE statements kind of go into the fact that I can attend a community college class in something that I am interested in, or I can go to a community-led class in something that I'm interested in, because realistically obtaining a 4-year, degree for my student population isn't, it's not unheard of, I'm sure, but it's highly unlikely, to be honest. And so we work then on steps that's going to make them be more independent if they were to go to a community college class. So are we going to be learning how to read the campus map? Are we going to be learning how to read the bus schedule? Are we, different things? Are we going to learn how to pack our backpack correctly, that we have our tablet and we have our books and our pencils? So depending on the student and the level that they're at, the goals can range, have a wide range of different skills that are really life skills based, but get them a little bit closer to the goals that they would like to work on.
So do you actually do those assessments and help the kids, or do you leave it to the school?
Oh, no, I do the assessments as the educator in California. So they're not formal assessments, they're informal assessments that I work with them. The formal assessments are done by our school psychologists. We are limited in the types of assessments that we have for our demographic, especially for formal when it comes to transition skills. But we have picture inventories, we have ones with illustrations, and then a lot of it is interviewing. So I ask a lot of questions to pull the information out from them. And then if I have students who are on a communication device, then, I have to go another step further. I got to program everything, teach them where everything is, and then start asking those questions. So when I say it's a 4-year process, it's a 4-year process when they start as a freshman, teaching them how to communicate their wants and needs and what they want to do when they're older.
Right. And I'm just thinking about it, and even our general ed population could probably use this a lot.
I'm not saying that's not true, but it is. So, we have to pre-teach everything for our students, any student. And if we're not giving the information, like we watch little job clip videos, for 5 minutes every day. So they have an introduction to a different job. Oh, that might be interesting. And that doesn't hurt for a general ed kid to do that either as part of a class. That doesn't hurt at all. There's a wide world out there outside of programming video games, and and they're going to mine Bitcoin or whatever they're going to do. They're going to be it's not YouTube, a TikTok star.
Right. So what do you do if when you have a student that has an unrealistic goal. Like, for example, like I know you just said those, but like I had a student one time when I taught high school that said his plans for after high school was to play pro football. Yeah, he didn't play
Are we on the
football.
football team now is the question.
No, he was not even on the football team now, right? So
Okay.
realistically, the chances of him playing pro football, and he was also on special diploma, so
Mhm.
even lower chances, because usually the minimum I know is they're usually drafted from college level, not from high school level. So
Yeah.
what do you like? How would you address that? How do you handle
So when they have
coaching the child?
a passion that is realistically probably outside of most people aren't going to be pro football players, basketball players, or baseball players, right? Right. Less than
Right.
0.2%. I don't know what the percentage is. Um, so they love football. Okay. Can you manage a retail store that sells football equipment? Can you stock shelves with football team jerseys? Can you, for my demographic, that I'm thinking my demographic. So we're pulling in their passion into something that is manageable and something that is accessible for them. For the other students that, I don't know, they can be master at fantasy football. I don't know. Football's a hard one for me. I don't know anything about.
Sorry, and it's hard for me too because I know much, but it's just I remember it was just one of the kids. The kids used to be like, "Yeah, you're ridiculous. You'll never play." And I'm like, "Shh, fantasy world
Mhm.
is a good place to be. Like, let people have
Right,
their
but
dreams."
there's skill sets that you can go, you can, like I said, fantasy football kind of fulfills some of that for them. I mean, I know it's not a career move, but is something that we do focus on leisure activities. We do talk about how to have hobbies, that, maybe they get to work at a football stadium, right? That you can be
Yep,
in the concession stand, you can be taking tickets. That's all in that realm of what the student wants to do. That is more likely,
right.
right?
And so that's what you do. You help
Mhm.
them find a way. Like they might not get to where they want in that, but they can still be involved,
Yes,
which
yes.
is great. So I know we talked about how they looked, the student driven. What do you do, like personally, when parents are trying to overshadow or take over things? Because parents never do that.
I'm not a helicopter parent. What are you talking about? Um, to be honest, I tell the parent, I'm like, this is what they want, and we know you're going to support them the best you can, and they already feel, the students who have parents that are very involved, they already feel that pressure. And I kind of back them up in the IEP. This is, their hopes and dreams. And, if there's a way to include accounting in that hopes and dream, great, mom and dad. But I do try to, talk with the parent, especially their freshman year. I really sit down and kind of go over what this plan is in detail. This actually, when I explain the ITP, really takes up almost half my IEP time allotted their freshman year. There's a lot to go over and to explain to parents, and a lot of worried faces. Um, and I explain it again their sophomore year, their junior year, and their senior year. I give them all the resources that I'm able to offer, but it's starting the process as soon as possible with the parent. It gives it a little bit more leeway, and a little, it makes it. And I put the parents' preferences in the IEP, sure, but not in the ITP.
Which makes sense. And
Yeah.
it's but then it's also, because yes, they're separate, but the IEP goals should also help get them to the ITP goals.
Yes,
Like they're
that's correct.
separate goals, but they still support each other.
But I can put the parent preferences
Right.
in their little section of the IEP.
And I know
I
you
can
said
write it in the notes to galore, but
right.
it's an I statement. It's not a mom statement.
Right, exactly. And I know like for me, like I switched careers what, like 9 years into teaching, I decided it wasn't working anymore and went to law school. So I'm sure like these kids, and that like I think about it, and who the heck knows at 14, 15, 16, even 18 what they want to be when they grow up, you know?
Exactly.
It's got to be
Exactly.
hard.
It is hard. But the key to this is really developing within writing the goals and finding their preferences. We also have an education plan put into place. So there is, what courses do I need to take to graduate? So if some students are in special programming, like at my school, we have a law enforcement programming. We have ROTC if you want to go into the military, sorry, junior ROTC. We have a medical where you can go and get, you're able to go into the medical field or into nursing. We have child development, we have auto shop. So if they're in some of these programs to get their certification by the time they exit high school, then they have to take specific classes. If they're trying to go to a 4-year college, it's specific classes. So there is that course outline to help them get to the step of graduation for our students. So that is also part of the ITP.
And what happens if
If
teenagers never change their mind? What happens if they start on one path at 14 and then their junior year, you know what? I don't like this anymore. I want to start something different. How do you switch that and make it work that they can still go the new path that they want?
So an ITP, just like the IEP, is a living document. You revisit it every year, and you can revisit it more than once a year, right? So at our school, I can only speak for the schools that I have taught at out here in California. If a student changes a pathway, parent has to kind of agree to it because the parent is still driving their education. And then we just switch the course of studies. So for our pathways, if you're going into automotive, that usually takes up all your elective classes. So you're still getting a high school diploma, but then you get a certificate that you've, finished, the auto shop courses. I don't know what it's called, but I don't know what the certificate is called. But anyway, it says you can go work, you can go change oil now, basically, and change tires.
Mechanic. Yeah, no, that's great.
But it's, the student will get more electives, basically, if they decide to drop out of those kind of pathways. I don't know what it looks like in other states, but I know out here in California that's kind of how it would work.
That makes sense. Yeah, out here in Maryland, there aren't the general high schools don't have the vocational tracks. There is a special high school that you can apply to, that you go to your regular high school for your core, and then you go there for the vocational stuff. But they're general. I think DC is starting to have some. It's a whole nother topic, but I feel that's where
I think we're missing that in public education, that we've taken
100%.
that away. And that is a missing component. And I'm happy, at least with my school site that I teach at now, that component has been brought back slowly but surely. But it needs to be reintroduced across the nation.
I agree. And I understand, looking back at the history, I understand why they started it, because it used to be kids were tracked, college track, vocational track at a young age. And usually it wasn't based on the child's ability. It was based on family status. And so, we looked at it and they swung the pendulum, but they swung it too far right? And because now
that's what we do in education. We go one way and then we go the other.
Exactly. Because now everybody should have the opportunity to be college bound, which you're right. Everybody should have the opportunity to be college bound. But you have this whole population of children that they don't want to go to college.
No.
Or they don't have the wherewithal to go to college. And so they're not going to college, and then they're graduating high school and they have nothing. They don't know, to go to vocational school, to have a tech trade, to know basic, how to open a bank account, how to buy a car, basic life skills that are just totally being neglected. Which, I know with the intellectual disability category, for the children going on certificate track here, I don't know what they call it in California, but yes, they get those life skills to the level that they can. But then our kids that are on regular diplma,
the rest of the students need it too.
Right.
no joke.
I always say, I get it, algebra, geometry, but consumer math, come on. Basic consumer math just needs to come back to the school systems. I don't know. That's a whole nother topic, right? A policy. I'm trying to get that
It is. We're going to change policy right here, right now.
Hey, you never know, but I mean, it's true. It's just, and it's frustrating. And I know for parents, it's just as frustrating, and the kids, because like, what do I do? But I love that California has those options at the vocational, and there, you're in, so you work in the schools, but you also advocate outside of the schools.
I do. I advocate across the country. I do not advocate within my community because to me, that's a conflict of interest. And I do in my community, I do presentations, I do educate parents, but I won't advocate, I won't be an IEP or anything like that with them. But if they have questions, I do parent groups and things like that. So we can make sure that they're still getting the support they need. And especially since my community is heavily migrant. And so it's important that they know what their rights are and what the school's responsibility should be and how to ask effectively for services and to get the things their student needs. And I'm not saying all schools that do this or any school does this, but students don't need the bare minimum, and parents who are new to this country or have been here one generation, it's thank you, and they don't know that their student needs more, right? That their student requires more support or maybe even less support than they're receiving, but the parents assume that the school is giving them all the correct information and leading their student down the right path. And I'm not saying schools do it on purpose, but things happen. I was
just gonna say, it's not only the immigrant workers.
No, it's not.
Because I see that often, parents call me and they get frustrated because the school's doing something and they know there's something, eligibility is a big one in assessments. Mm-hmm. They know something's not wrong, but something, their child needs extra support and they're just fighting the school for it. And I always say, the teacher in me gets protective of teachers sometimes, because
I do. I am very protective with the teachers as well.
But I also say, what? Teachers don't always know. And there's also the other thing that happens is that the higher ups, the principal might not like special ed. Right. Well, they don't know, or they're worried about budget.
Yeah, they're worried about budgets, but administrators are not educated in special education law, and they're not educated in what programming should look like as well. And I've seen this across everywhere, and I'm going to blame the university system for not training everybody correctly. That's who I'm going to blame. But the school districts need to have continuous training for their employees, and I don't see that happening as well. So it's okay, you got your teaching certificate, you have your credential, you know everything. Well, laws change, things change, and we don't know. No one told me, and it's an honest answer. And that's the one thing I would never want teachers who happen to unfortunately have to go through due process and have to talk about that they don't know because things weren't followed up with them. Policy wasn't changed. The school didn't change policy and educate their employees. And that's a disservice to teachers.
Right. And it's, I say all the time that the principal can make or break the special education department. And you can always tell at IEP meetings when the principal comes in as an overbearing and kind of sets the stage.
Wants to do all the talking.
Oh, yeah, I've had those. And the teachers are zip mouthed because they will never go against their principal, which they can't because that's their boss. That's like somebody in the, in the retail, telling the owner of the store that they're doing it all wrong. You don't do that. Whether the employee is right or not, you don't do that because you lose your job.
Exactly.
So it's always challenging. I had one IEP meeting that I looked dead. It was online, but I looked dead in the teacher. I looked at her and I said, would you say that under oath?
Yeah.
And the face changed because they don't think about that. Like,
Mm-mm.
obviously, when they're to my level and they're bringing an attorney and bringing me as an attorney, not as an advocate, then litigation is a possibility.
Right.
And the teachers don't realize they're the ones that are going to be on the hot seat,
They
not
are.
the principal. And, I try to give the teachers the out so that they can do it in a way that's not completely defying what the principal might have said.
Mhm.
Like, I'll hang on words and be like, well, wait a minute, didn't you just say that there was an issue at PE?
Mhm.
And so if there's an issue at PE that severe, should they really be with the gen ed population? And it's like, well, no, I guess not.
Mhm.
So it's like I've just given them
The
that
lead
they
in. Yeah.
right, the lead in, exactly. Because the thing is, yes, I'm an attorney, but I'm not adversarial. And I'm assuming you're the same way. Like,
No, I'm not.
right,
I try to pad that teacher to say the right things.
and it's about the child.
It is.
Like, getting adversarial, it doesn't help anyone.
Mm-mm.
And you have people dig into their positions and they, fight so often. And that's why I always say people ask me, like, when do you hire an attorney? When do you hire an advocate? I'm like, the minute you find out your child has special needs. Period.
Yeah.
Because if you wait, then what happens is, you then get to the fighting point and the school's here and you're here and now it's just a fight.
Yeah.
Whereas if you start earlier, we can help guide it so we don't get to that point.
Yeah. So I've seen principals dig in and I'm like, we came to talk about their freshman schedule. Like, why are you guys ready to argue? And I'm like, we just wanted to know what classes they were going to take. I'm like, we said it could just be a meeting with the counselor. And you're like, no, it needs to be an IEP. And I'm like, okay,
I love when they do that. And I don't know in California, but I know here in Maryland, and no, not so much DC, but in Maryland, when an attorney comes, their attorney usually
Always.
has to come.
Always.
And they also wind up, at least in Montgomery County, bringing people from central office.
Mhm.
And the people from central office usually know the compliance issues and the law and what can and can't be done. And it gets frustrating because, like, why couldn't you guys be at the last meeting that we brought up placement as an issue? Like they just add all these extra meetings. And that's the other reason why I tell families to bring in an attorney sometimes instead of an advocate, because if there's really going to be issues, the attorney brings the central office in and then you have more. Because I know, at least here in Maryland, the schools and in DC, the schools don't know what else is outside of their school.
Right.
And what other options are out there.
Right. No, I agree. So for me as an advocate, when I have my advocate hat on, I prep the IEP team. These are our concerns. So they are aware of what we're going to bring up and hopefully have some solutions before we get to that point. And a lot of times it's, we always ask for the IEP draft early. And for parents out there who are listening, and it's not a requirement by law that you give us that draft early, but it sure is a nice thing to do and speeds up the meeting.
Well, actually, by law, federal law says that reports and any documents should be given reasonable time in advance. So technically, legally, it is, but what's reasonable time?
Yeah, what's reasonable time at the meeting, right? So in California, it's not a given that you will get your IEP draft before the meeting. As a teacher, I try to give at least a week in advance if I can. If I can get, it's always my outside service providers. It's always OTPT.
Yep, same here.
Who cannot get what I need done and holds me up from giving out the draft earlier.
What I've had some schools do in those situations is they've actually just sent us goals and objectives.
Mm-hmm.
So not even the draft IEP, but just like, here's the present levels, goals and objectives, so that you don't have to worry about the people that don't have it, so that at least you know where you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I put a little note. I'm like, speech didn't get it into me on time. I'm sorry.
Right.
But here is what we are looking for. And so I always have progress report on how they did on their goals, their present levels, and then of course their goals and objectives of what I would like projecting what next year should look like. Those are the documents that I send to my parents as a teacher. That's what I've been directed that I'm allowed to do.
So again, what you're allowed to do.
What I'm allowed to do, right? So mostly when I see drafts, we never see the service page. We never see what the actual offer of FAPE will be, because that would, be predetermination, and we're not doing that. We're going to talk through the meeting and then have that discussion. So when I get drafts from my clients, I'm looking for the present levels, and I'm looking for how they did and to talk about new goals. And so that's the key, at least for parents who are listening, to try to get those those components, so you know what the path is.
Right.
And how we're doing.
The services, it's so frustrating in placement because, I get it. You don't want to predetermine. So, okay, we know the child is autistic. We know that's what their ASD is their coding. We know that. So why aren't you bringing somebody from central office that knows all of the curriculums of ASD? That's not predetermining.
Right.
That's bringing somebody with knowledge of what other avenues are out there.
Right.
Which gets frustrating that it has to go to the, they're not here yet because we weren't anticipating it going that way, especially at eligibility.
Yes.
And it's frustrating to me. And that's why, a lot of times I'll reach out to legal and be like, hey, we're requesting that these people be there, because it makes sense, because if not, you're delaying the process. And then I don't know about you guys, but for us, a lot of times I advise my clients to always go look at different programs.
Yes.
And sometimes, the schools will be like, oh, we can't set that up. I'm like, their homeschool doesn't have to set it up in Boundary. The parents just can call and say, hey, look, I want to come see it.
I would like a tour.
Right, exactly. And that helps a lot. Because once the parents see it, because if not, you're just, you're
going in blind.
Right, exactly. They're going and saying, oh, well, this is what the classroom looks like, and this is what they're doing. But you actually walk into that classroom and not exactly where they are.
Yeah.
So it's
important. So I know parents request that they would like to go in and see other programming. But then there's, what is it? Not HIPAA. It's the other one. FERPA.
Confidentiality. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it FERPA?
Yeah.
No.
FERPA, I think so. Yeah.
It's FERPA. So so you go in before school starts and you meet the teacher and you see the classroom, so you're not violating a student's rights. And so, but even getting that part, parents don't understand why I can't sit in there for 3 hours and watch the teacher teach. Right. So, but those are all things that they can do and they should do. I mean, if you were going to go look at a private school, you would go tour the schools, right?
Exactly.
You would go see what's going on, the facilities. And, now that parents do have more leeway and they can choose their school sites with school of choice, then, maybe you should go do that. And so I know that unfortunately in California, though, if you're on an IEP and you request a school of choice and your child did qualify for transportation, if it was a parent choice, transportation wouldn't be provided.
Interesting.
If it's a school of choice. Now, if we're saying the student needs to go there as an IEP team, then yes, transportation would be provided. Or if that
which makes sense.
Yeah, if it was a special programming for kids with emotional disturbance, it's only at one school site, then yes, the school district would provide transportation. But if it's a school of choice, that's the parent's choice, and that means they have to provide transportation.
Which makes sense, because for the general education population, it's the same way.
Yeah.
If they were offering transportation to the general ed in some form, then it would be look different. But that totally makes sense. So I'm trying to think of what else, but then I'm also looking at the clock and going, wow, like I could talk to you all day. Like, I'm sure we could talk like forever on this
Oh,
stuff.
yes.
It's always
Back to the transition plan.
you know, right? Back to the transition. So I want to move over to like your advocacy side. So for people that might need an advocate, do you only advocate for the transition, or is that just your specialty? You still do everything?
My specialty is high school students. I do advocate for students in the elementary and middle school, but my specialty is high school age. So yes, the transition plan would be, my specialty. Along with students with intellectual disabilities.
And how do people get in touch with you? Like, so if parents say, oh, wow, this is great, I want her to help me with my child. How should parents get in touch with you?
I have a website, and it's iepsupport.org. And so all my contact information is there. And that's the easiest way to get hold of me. If you would like to send an email, it'd be shannon@iepsupport.org.
Great. And those links, we'll have all those links in the show notes once this gets posted everywhere. So thank you so much, Shannon. This has been so awesome. I love talking to other advocates and hearing about other states. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Stress-Free IEP with your host, Frances Shefter. Remember, you do not need to do it all alone. You can reach Frances through shefterlaw.com, where prior episodes are also posted. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing the show with others through YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more.